Offender specializing in Christmas visits, he pretended to be homeless to break into homes. The Ivanov family was shocked, but it brought them even closer together. Olga now always checked guests, and Misha started dreaming of a career as a police officer. This story teaches us that kindness is important, but caution is paramount. The third story unfolds in St. Petersburg, in an old house on Nevsky Prospect, where an elderly woman named Ekaterina Petrovna lived. She was 75, and she always spent Christmas alone after her husband died. In 2020, the year of the pandemic, she decided to decorate her apartment to alleviate some of the sadness. The Christmas tree, the candles, the old photographs, everything reminded me of happy times. But at night, when the clock struck midnight, she heard a rustling outside her window. The wind, she thought, but the rustling repeated, and the glass quietly cracked. A masked man entered the room, with a bag slung over his shoulder. "Be quiet, old woman, or I'll slit your throat," he hissed, shining a flashlight. Ekaterina Petrovna, despite her age, didn't lose her composure. She was a war veteran, survived the siege, and fear was familiar to her. While the thief was rummaging through the closets looking for valuables, she discreetly pressed the alarm button on her bracelet, a gift from her grandson, connected to a security service. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The thief found a box with savings, but suddenly a siren wailed throughout the house. He panicked, rushed to the window, but Ekaterina Petrovna.
On that frosty Christmas night in 2012, in a small village near Novosibirsk, a young mother named Maria was returning home from a neighbor's house, where she helped prepare a festive table. The snow crunched underfoot, and the air smelled of fresh pastries and pine needles from a decorated Christmas tree. Suddenly, a strange rustling sound came from the darkness of the forest, and she saw red eyes burning in the night. "It's a wolf," she thought with horror, speeding up her pace. If you like stories like this, where a holiday turns into a nightmare, subscribe to the channel right now to hear how Maria almost fell victim to something much worse than an ordinary beast. Maria lived with her husband and two young daughters in an old wooden house on the edge of the village. Christmas has always been a quiet family holiday, Christmas Eve with a party, carols from the neighbors' children, a night service in the church. But that year, her husband went to the city to work, leaving her alone with the children. She was walking along the path, clutching a basket of pies in her hands, when the rustle was repeated closer. She turned around and saw a figure, tall, stooped, with long arms, covered with snow. It wasn't a wolf. The figure moved strangely, as if it was sliding through the snow, leaving no footprints. Maria's heart began to pound. She remembered old grandmother's stories about goblins and evil spirits that come out on Christmas Day. The tension grew with every step. The figure approached, letting out a low growl like the moan of the wind. Maria ran, but the snow was deep and her feet were sinking in. She was screaming, but the village was far away. Suddenly, the creature grabbed her shoulder, cold as ice. She broke free, fell, and lost her basket. In a panic, she grabbed a branch and hit it. There was a screech, and the figure retreated. Maria ran home, locked the door, and woke the children. They burned lights and prayed all night. In the morning, the neighbors found huge, inhuman footprints leading into the forest. It turned out to be an escaped prisoner, dressed in skins, who had escaped from the colony and gone mad from the cold. He attacked several that winter, but Maria survived because of her courage. Since then, every Christmas, she tells this story to the children, reminding them to be careful during the holidays. Let's move on to the second story that happened in Moscow on Christmas Eve 2018. An elderly man named Viktor Ivanovich was walking home from the market, loaded with bags of groceries for a festive table. He was lonely, his wife had died a year ago, and the children were far away. At the entrance, he heard footsteps behind him. The neighbor, probably, he thought, but when he entered the elevator, the door slammed shut, and a young guy in a mask flew into the cabin. "Grandfather, wallet, phone, quickly. Stop it," he hissed, pointing the knife. Victor froze, but memories of the war and the blockade surfaced in his head. He was not at a loss. The guy was nervous, his hands were shaking. Victor slowly reached into his pocket, but instead of a wallet he took out an old relic gas canister from the 90s. Splashed it right in the eyes. The robber howled, blinded. Victor pushed him and jumped out onto the floor. He shouted, "Help!" The neighbors ran out, pinned down the attacker. The police later said it was a serial robber who preyed on pensioners during the holidays. Victor became the hero of the district, and that night taught him that even in old age you can fight. Now he goes to church every Christmas and gives thanks for a second life. The third story took place in St. Petersburg in 2021, during the pandemic year, when everyone was staying at home. The Petrov family, father, mother and teenage son, decided to decorate the apartment, despite the lockdown. Christmas tree, garlands, candles. But at night, my son heard a knock on the window on the 5th floor. The wind, the mother said, but the knocking came again. They looked out. A man in black was standing on the ledge, trying to open the window. Thief! The father shouted. They barricaded the door and called the police. The attacker was a mountaineer thief who specialized in high-rise buildings during the holidays, when people are relaxed. He climbed over the balcony, but the noise scared him away. The police caught him on the roof. The family was shocked, but it brought them together. The son began to engage in self-defense. The father installed an alarm system. Christmas that year was a lesson in vigilance for them, but also a reminder of how fragile peace is. The fourth story is the most dramatic, from the Krasnoyarsk territory, 2019. Two friends, Alexei and Dmitry, decided to spend Christmas in an abandoned hut in the taiga, away from the city. Snowstorm, bonfire, guitar, heart-to-heart conversations. But at night they heard a howl, not a wolf's, but a human's. We looked out. 3 men with guns were circling around the hut. "Open it, or we'll burn it," they shouted. They were poachers who mistook their friends for huntsmen. The friends barricaded themselves in, but the door was cracking. Alexei grabbed an axe, Dmitry grabbed a hunting rifle. The siege began. Gunshots, screams. One poacher climbed through the window, but Alexei wounded him. The blizzard helped. The poachers panicked. One went into the snow and froze. The police, called by satellite phone, arrived by helicopter. The friends survived with wounds, but became like brothers. That night showed that Christmas can be a struggle for life in the taiga. These 4 real-life stories, based on cases from the lives of Russians, remind us that a holiday is a time of joy, but also of trials. People survived through courage, speed, and faith. May your Christmas be only bright and warm. Now share in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching this video? On that dead Christmas night in 2022, in a small village near Voronezh, a lonely man named Sergei woke up to a strange creaking outside the window. The snow was falling in flakes, the wind was howling in the chimney, but the creaking was rhythmic, as if someone was slowly swinging on an old swing in the yard. He went to the window and froze. In the moonlight, a woman in a white dress was sitting on a swing, her long hair covered her face, and her head was unnaturally tilted. If such stories make your heart beat faster, subscribe to the channel right now, because then you will find out why Sergei still can't calmly celebrate Christmas. Sergei lived alone in a house inherited from his parents. His wife had left many years ago, there were no children, and he spent the holidays in silence, TV, a bottle, memories. That night, at first he thought it was a hallucination from exhaustion. But the woman on the swing looked up, and he saw empty eye sockets. Sergei staggered back, his heart pounding so hard that his ears hurt. He turned on all the lights in the house, checked the doors, everything was locked. The creaking continued. He dialed the neighbors. No one answered, everyone was asleep after the festive table. Then he picked up his phone and started filming out the window to show in the morning that he wasn't imagining things. The video showed the figure slowly swaying, and then abruptly turning its head towards the camera. Sergei dropped the phone and retreated to the back of the room. Suddenly the lights went out. The whole village was de-energized. In the darkness, he heard footsteps on the porch, then a knock on the door. Quiet, but persistent. "Open up, it's cold," a woman's voice, trembling, plaintive. Sergei grabbed an axe from the pantry and stood at the door, not breathing. The knocking continued for hours. In the morning, when the light came back, there were no footprints on the porch, only the snow was clear, as if no one had come. But the swing was broken, the chains were broken. The police arrived, watched the video, shrugged their shoulders, they said it was probably a drunken prank or imagined it. But a week later, the news showed that the body of a young woman who died in an accident exactly 1 year ago on Christmas Eve had been found in a nearby neighborhood. She was on her way to her family and crashed near Sergei's village. The woman in the white dress is in the photo. Since then, every Christmas, Sergei leaves home for the entire Yuletide week. He says that sometimes he still hears the creak of the swing, even in a city apartment. The second story took place in Yekaterinburg on Christmas Eve 2020. A young couple, Daria and Anton, have just moved into a new apartment in an old house on the outskirts. The house was built before the war, with high ceilings and thick walls. They decorated the Christmas tree, laughed, and planned their first holiday night together. Suddenly, at 1 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang. It's exactly 00:00 on the clock. Anton looked through the peephole, but it was empty. They called again, more insistently. Daria was scared. Don't open it. They called the police, but while they were waiting, they heard children's laughter outside the door, ringing, cheerful, as if several children were playing hide and seek on the landing. Anton looked through the peephole again, but there was no one there. The laughter turned into crying, then into a cry of, "Mom!" Daria began to cry with fear. When the police arrived, the playground was empty, but someone chalked a Christmas star on the door of their apartment and wrote, "Come back." The management company later told me that a family with 3 children lived in this apartment in 1941 during the evacuation. My mother went out to buy bread on Christmas Eve, was bombed and did not return. The children were later found frozen. They were waiting for their mother at the door. Since then, new residents often hear children's voices on Christmas night. Daria and Anton moved out a month later. Now they celebrate the holiday only in hotels or with relatives. The third story happened in Kaliningrad in 2023. Anastasia, a student, rented a room in an old German house divided into apartments. The hostess, an elderly German by birth, warned, "On Christmas Day, do not leave the window open, even if it is hot." Anastasia laughed. Superstition. On Christmas night, she forgot to close the window and went to bed. I woke up to the feeling that someone was in the room. In the corner stood a tall figure in an old military uniform, with his face hidden in shadow. She didn't move, just stared. Anastasia screamed, turned on the light, no one. But there was an old German Christmas greeting card from 1944 on the windowsill. It was handwritten, "We are waiting for you at home." Anastasia ran out into the hallway and woke the hostess. The old lady paled. "It's him. A soldier who did not return from the front. Every year at Christmas he looks for his bride, who lived in this room." Anastasia left for her parents the very next day and never rented a place in the old houses again. The landlady then closed the room forever. The fourth, scariest story happened in an abandoned village near Perm in 2017. A group of friends, 4 guys and 2 girls, decided to spend Christmas in an old house, which one of them found on the internet as an atmospheric place for a holiday. The house had been empty for 20 years, but it was intact, with a stove and a well. They arrived in the evening, lit the stove, set the table, turned on the music. At midnight, the lights went out and the generator shut down. In the silence, they heard carols outside the window, old, church Slavonic, male and female voices interspersed. We went out onto the porch, no one, just snow and forest. We returned to the house, and new appliances appeared on the table, old, darkened with age, 6 people more. One of the guys was joking, "We had guests waiting for us." But the joke stopped. They saw silhouettes in the window. People in old clothes were standing in a circle around the house and looking inside. The girls started crying. The guys tried to start the car, but it wouldn't start. The phones weren't picking up the network. They barricaded themselves in, burning everything they could to keep the light on. The voices outside the window sang all night. In the morning, when dawn broke, the silhouettes disappeared. There are hundreds of bare footprints in the snow around the house, leading out of the forest and back into the forest. The car started the first time. Later, the locals told us that an entire collective farm was shot in this village in the 1930s for religious rites. People were taken out on Christmas night and shot in the woods. Since then, on Yuletide, the shadows of those who sang carols before their deaths have appeared there. The friends never went to abandoned places again. One of them, the one who found the house, hanged himself a year later, saying that the voices wouldn't stop in his head. These 4 creepy but real stories that happen to ordinary people over the years show that Christmas and Yuletide are a delicate time when the boundary between worlds becomes fragile. Some meetings leave a lifelong mark. Be careful during the holidays, listen to the silence and don't open the door to the unknown. May your Christmas be only warm and bright. Now write in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching this video?